Hi there, my name is Ian Berry and welcome to another candid and convivial conversation. And I'm thrilled today that my guest, I'll call him a hero in every sense of the word, is none other than Glenn Capelli. And Glenn has been one of my all-time favourite speakers, I guess, for the 25 years I've been in the speaking business myself. And I'm thrilled today to have Glenn as my guest. So Glenn, welcome.
G'day, Ian. Pleasure to be here, mate.
Glenn is in the corporate leadership space, but he's also in the educational leadership space and has been for many years. And Glenn's going to do some sharing with us about what he's seen and what he understands about the essence of leadership. And Glenn's going to do that for probably about 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll engage in a Q&A a little bit after that. So Glenn, over to you. What is the essence of leadership?
When I'm working with CEOs, I always say that CEO stands for Chief Education Officer. So to be a Chief Education Officer is really about creating the environment and creating an environment where people hum. And what I mean by that is what we would call group genius. You know, how round is your table? How good is your sharing? So what is the diversity of minds that you bring to the table? How honestly and openly do they share and bubble up ideas to create that environment? And to say it hums, or in another word for it would be the word flow. You know, Mahaley Csikszentmihalyi's wonderful research about us at our very, very best. So, but it becomes really challenging because to be a Chief Education Officer, it means that you really have to self-actualise. Now, you need to go back almost to the Maslow model, and you really need to grow as a human being yourself and as a learner yourself, and then create an environment that enables everybody to be able to take that road to be the best them that they can possibly be. Now, blend that in with some of the research in 1989. So when you were just a wee lad, in 1989, I received a Sir Winston Churchill Study Fellowship. So Sir Winston Churchill, the late Prime Minister of the UK, had left a legacy where people could apply to do an overseas trip for best practice research. And I got to travel to the United States to work with neuroscientists, to work with people in education and in learning about this incredible brain of ours. And one of the researchers, Art Costa, said that 80% of people, 80% of adults have no metacognition. Now, in human being speak, it means what he was saying is that 8 out of 10 people have never thought about the way they think. And when I heard that, I said, mate, if that's true, then it's bloody scary. And he said, well, indeed it is true. And indeed, and he laughed and he said, it is scary. So it means if we're really going to grow ourselves as human beings, we need to fully understand ways and methodology of thinking. And that can be a wonderful and a challenging journey. So a Chief Education Officer, anyone in leadership, has to be really thorough, examining who they are, their self-knowledge, their self-understanding, and then their ability to grow themselves, to go beyond who they are. Because when we stand up in leadership, we stand up. And it means we put ourselves in the line of fire. And part of our brain is going, this is scary, line of fire, we're going to get sniped. So we've got to have, the ability with agility, and we've got to be grit fit as well, and also have a great understanding of ourselves and other human beings and the diversity of other human beings. Because you're leading an organisation, yes, you're leading systems, but you're leading people. It's that people factor that is going to be the magic of it all. So one of the things that I teach, and you would know it well, that I'm a great fan of this. And this is the word for Auslan, or signing for our deaf community here in Australia. Now, Australian signing is different than American, different than French, very dynamic languages. And my signing, if I'm with the deaf community, it's too slow, it's kind of limited. But I think signing is a beautiful learning language. And it brings out physicality. My signing teacher said, you've got to bring your whole body to signing. You've got to bring every emotion. And you've got to do that with leadership as well. You've got to do it with learning. Bring everything you've got to it. So there'd be two words, if we want to understand how we think, there'd be two words that I would teach. And one looks as if you're patting a cat. And it's one way to say the word tame. So you're taming something. And then there would be a movement like you're brewing something or stirring a brew, and that would be the word for wicked. Now, tame and wicked became part of our lexicon of thinking in 1972. Researchers in thinking were saying that a tame problem is reasonable with a single correct answer. So, and there are many things in life that have got single correct answers. And you want to be good at getting single correct answers. But a lot of life, and certainly a lot of leadership, is not about the tame, it's about the wicked. And a wicked problem is one that doesn't have a single correct answer. And yet the human brain often wants it to have a single correct answer. So people go looking for the silver bullet. Give me the one thing our organisation needs to do. Give me one way to do it. And often, like in approaching an illness like cancer, approaching any massive problem or challenge in life, there isn't a single correct answer. There's a variety of partial solutions. So a wicked problem has a variety of partial solutions. You can't solve it alone. In fact, you can't necessarily solve it. It requires group genius. It requires how round is your table, how good is your sharing, different minds. And some people may say, I've got the answer for you, but it won't be the answer. And what is the answer for Ian Berry will not be the answer for Glenn Capelli. What is the answer for this business will not be the same answer for a different business, because things are contextual. So wicked problems are contextual. They require a variety of partial solutions, and they require a lot of robust in there chat and talk and possibilities, giving this a go, giving that a go, and then you, little bit by little bit by little bit, you move forward. And sometimes, instead of moving forward or upwards, you move backwards. And sometimes you feel absolutely confused because you don't know where to start. Now, the difficulty in these situations is some environments they live in the world of tame, and people are afraid to say, listen, I've got no clue. Listen, this is some problem we've never ever seen before, so we need a whole different kind of way of looking at it. And we're going to come up with some ideas that will only partially work, or come up with some ideas that will be flops initially, but if we work it, tweak it, work it through, we can, little bit by little bit. And it's not just a how better thinking, it's also a how else thinking. So I love the world of Kaizen, that ongoing small improvements, measuring where you're at and getting better at it. I love that, but that's only a solution for the tame world. And it becomes part of the solution of a wicked world, but only part. Every wicked problem has got tame elements. You know, we've seen businesses fall over because they got the tame stuff wrong. You know, I loved Ernest Hemingway in one of his novels. One character says, how did you go bankrupt? And the other character answers, gradually, then suddenly.
Yes, that's right.
Take our eye off that ball when we don't get our numbers right. But likewise, I was presenting to, working with 700 nutritionist dietitians, and most of them had thorough research papers, PhD research on obesity or anorexia or this particular protein. And the research was amazing. The research will solve some of the tame elements, but it doesn't solve the problem. Obesity is a wicked problem. You need the data, and it needs to be accurate and it needs to be good. But then you need a whole stack of possible potential part solutions that will be different for every single human being. So one of the things in thinking, and you know, it's amazing, that was 1972, we defined things as tame and wicked. And yet for most human beings, they've never heard of the concept in that way. So it is 80% of people don't know metacognition. Understand the tame world really, really well, be really, really good at it, have people in your group that are brilliant at getting the maths right, but know that's only part of the answer. It's then how you do the other stuff. It's how you do that communication. So creating environments where it's a total learning environment requires people to, I guess a favourite word of mine in signing, Ian, and you see me quite often, when we rub our hands together like this. Now, in the hearing and speaking world, this might be, what can I get out of this? Here's a chance to make some money. But in the deaf community, this is, okay, let's get stuck in. We've got a bit of a problem here. Let's get stuck in. I might not be able to work the whole thing out, but let's get stuck in. Let's do it bit by bit by bit, chunk by chunk by chunk. How better, how else thinking combined. And that's what the wicked world takes. It's a lot of get stuck in. And innovation requires bravery. It requires how else thinking. Agility requires some how else thinking and thinking on our feet. So when I work with organisations and leaders, one of the first things I will outline is this difference between tame and wicked. They work some problems through, and some of them, you'll give them a tame problem. Now, tame problems doesn't make it easy. You give them, and they'll look at it and go, so some CEOs are not particularly good at the maths of a tame problem, but they will be able to employ somebody who is. And you've got to have those people in your brew. Then just to understand that leadership's often about the wicked, and therefore it's how you bring your people together as a think tank, as I say, that group genius aspect. And I'll say to organisations, it's a brew of 5 things. Now, the 5 I look at, the first one, the foundational one, is culture and character. And you had some great convivial conversation. There's another 2 great C's, the character and culture. So what's the philosophy of your place? What is the philosophy as you as a human being? Or if I throw in another unknown word for most people, quiddity, Q-U-I-D-D-I-T-Y, quiddity. And quiddity is a philosophy word meaning the essential essence of something or someone. What is the essential essence of what you're about? What is your essential aboutness as a human being? What is your essential aboutness as an organisation? And the second layer of the definition of quiddity is that within that quiddity, within your essential element of self, there is some oddity, some peculiarity. And you've got to love the oddity. You just got to, and that oddity may be the distinguishing thing that others can't copy. So what is your foundation? What is your place on about? Character and culture. The second layer is those conversations that we're having here, the convivial and challenging conversations. So what's the shared vocabulary and understanding? The CEO often thinks because they stand up and say something that everybody gets it. They need to get it in a whole stack of different ways, time and time and time again. And then it becomes part of how you do things. So that Kaizen, how better conversations, and that wide Zen, as I call it, the how else thinking. What other crayons can we use that we're not? Then, after you get character and culture, conversations and vocabulary, the third layer is strategy. And yet that's where a lot of organisations want to start. They'll get in an Ian Berry or they'll get in a Glenn Capelli and they'll say, give us a strategy, give us a strategy. And I'll say, listen, mate, I can give you a bucket load of strategies, but they don't work. Well, let me rephrase that. They only work if it links into what you're about as an organisation. The next layer is methodology. And that is basically that some people will learn by me just talking. Other people will learn by me teaching a few sign languages as we go. Some people will need to read it in a book. Different people, different folks, different strokes of learning. And you've got to have ways to back up the message. And everything you're on about, of course, has got to show up in your behaviour. So that honouring the methodologies, teaching things in a variety of ways, reaching people in a variety of ways, which helps tap into your essential creativity as an innovator too. And finally, so we've got the cultural base, we've got the character, we've got the conversations, the Kaizens, the wide Zens, the how better, the how else. We've got a variety of strategies, and one I'll talk through as a personal favourite a bit later. And then we've got methodologies, ways to reach people. But all of that will come to nothing if you don't have systems that support and back up that whole structure. One of my favourite lines, it used to be in France that they decided they would pay firefighters based on the number of fires they put out. And anyone spot the potential? I'd say in sign language, you put your hand out like this and you go like this. You know? And a chap at a conference said, "I missed that. What does that mean?" But this whole thing, you know, there's an organisation that I love working with. It's a Kiwi group. They're so exciting. The Fox Group, they ran a whole variety of companies with them. And they're really about this teamwork approach. But at one stage, they introduced a program where 10 of their best performing people would get a huge, wonderful trip. Now, they always had a conference that everyone could go to, but there would be another element of going, you know, to this big, and it actually took away from the team working aspect. And sensibly, after a year of doing it, they said, listen, it worked beautifully for the 10 people, but it is not the ethos of our organisation. So they pulled back for it and found a way to reward more folk at a deeper and better level. So if you're about teamwork as your absolute guts character thing, and yet you have an incentivised motivation program for an individual, then teamwork's not going to spread. So what is it that you're about, and how do your systems support that, rather than actually being systems errors that prevent it from happening? So you can see when you're creating an environment with all of these layers, it's a wicked brew. And it's how we get that wicked brew together. And within it, there are the tame elements. We want to be good within that, but getting the tame stuff right is only... If I could, Ian, I'll hit upon one of the strategies that I'll use before we open it up to a Q&A.
Yeah.
Because this is one of my favourite multi-purpose thinking tools that we've come up with. And originally, I'm not even sure how it bounced into my mind, probably because I love cryptic crosswords and playing with language. But I came up with 3 Russian brothers. And then I decided the 3 Russian brothers weren't enough, so the 3 Russian brothers had a cousin. And then the cousin has got a friend who's got a girlfriend. So we end up with 5 in the Russians model. But the original 3 is the first Russian brother. His name is Morov. So you look at all the good stuff that you're already doing that you might do a little bit more of. A youngster hands in an essay to the teacher goes, what I love about this essay is this, this and this. And if you did a little bit more of that here, it would be an even stronger essay. You've got a health program, you're walking around the block for 30 minutes, but now you're going to do the other way where there's more uphill. You're doing a bit more of something. And every organisation can say, what do we need to be doing more of to become a quality organisation? If we're really going to achieve our aim of such and such, what do we need more of? The second Russian brother is more challenging. His name is less of. And human beings tend to love the more. But how do we do less? Often a website is better with less. An essay is better with an edit. A speech can be better with less. So less of. We can be healthier with less of certain things. For our organisation to prosper, it's not just about more, it may be more about less. Then the third Russian brother is even trickier, rid of. And we're not things, you know. We hold on to a lot of stuff. Sometimes you might need to shed a particular client. Sometimes you might need to be rid of a certain attitude in your workforce, cynicism, for example. You know, learning to be able to be rid of things and doing rid of well can be vital to us. So I had my more of, my less of, my rid of, and then I decided that the cousin's name was toss in. So what new stuff do we toss into the brew? So even as a systematic conversation in meetings, the Russians might be something. You know, you're working on a big project. What do we need more of? What do we need less of? What do we need to get rid of? What do we need to toss into the brew that we don't already have? And then the cousin's friend's girlfriend came into being because Carmen's Muesli, I don't know if you've ever eaten Carmen's Muesli or know the organisation, but they had a blueberry bar that they bought out. and it was one of their products that wasn't working. So they changed one thing. They stopped calling it a blueberry bar and called it a superfood bar. And it doubled their sales instantly. Sometimes the great innovation, the innovative Russian, if you like, is instead of. So instead of this material, what would happen if we use this material? You know, whether it was Edison coming up with the light bulb, instead of this, what if this? If we weren't allowed to have that, what could we replace it with? So it's a great innovating type thing. Now, the Russians, to me, are quite magnificent because they are pretty simple, but also I work with some organisations that they're doing 360-degree feedback 4 times a year, and it's really stressful for a lot of folk. But the Russians, as long as you use a funny voice, so me as a leader, what do I need to do more of? It takes some of the threat and sting out of it, and you get your team working together on it. And we've had a multiplicity of organisations, schools, communities go through the Russians to not only solve problems, but to invent better ways, to be better, smarter, and to be wiser in outcome.
Fascinating. Well, let's get stuck in.
Good physical learner is Mr. Berry.
Well, I'm always fascinated by your ability to talk about complex things in a simple way, which to me is often at the essence of leadership. I mean, I reflected, 1992, I gave a seminar for a bunch of CEOs in Adelaide, and the organiser said, I want you to be controversial, which, as you know, wasn't all that hard for me to do. But I started by saying management is dead. And what I was talking about was this idea of that we manage people. And it caused a bit of a furor. In fact, a quite angry guy in the front row said, well, what's management then? And I said management is and I used the word science at that point, I later changed it to practice. Management is the practice of making it simple for people to bring everything remarkable that they are to everything they do. And leadership is the art of doing that. Leadership's the art of inspiring people to bring everything remarkable that they are to everything they do. Now, those kind of definitions have stood the test of time. And I was thinking about that because what you were saying earlier is, I think you said 8 out of 10 people haven't thought about how they think. And yet here we are. When I was researching one of my books, Changing What's Normal, I discovered that 100 billion people have walked planet Earth, roughly, but there's never been a duplicate. So even by the nature of our birth, we're remarkable, and yet most people have either forgotten or don't know that they're remarkable. And what you're saying is that we're all remarkable. We've just got to think about it in a different way. And I love that, this idea of tame and wicked. And it seems to me that the reason why leadership is challenging is because most of the focus is on tame and not enough's on the wicked.
Yes, and at the same time, one of the things in this human brain of ours, and there is an attraction to the silver bullet. And if we go beyond silver bullet one small step, we get to binary. So there's an attraction to the brain to be binary. So black, white, good, bad, best, worst. I blame Charles Dickens, that wonderful opening line of a novel. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. And for a good period of time, that's how my mum lived. My mum kicked into what we would now call it postnatal depression. But in those days, it just meant she got sick and there was she went into psychiatric care, and her treatment put her into bipolar. So it was either the best thing in the world or the worst thing in the world, the best thing in the world, the worst thing in the world. So there is an element to our brain where we will go either or rather than and. And I love this. So that it's tame and wicked. It's not tame or wicked.
No.
Within it. But it's also another way to put that complex to simple. And we would teach kids that in signing it would be I, which is running your finger down your body. I have, like grabbing an apple and pulling to your chest. I have throw your fingers off your hand like abracadabra is the word for magic. I have a magic. And then put your hands in your head. It's one of the many ways to say brain. I have a magic brain. And then we would back it up by saying this magic brain of yours is chock-a-block full of crayons. And you don't just have one or two crayons in your brain. You've got a whole big box of 96 wonderful, colourful crayons. And every crayon is a talent. Now, sometimes certain crayons may get damaged. My brother's crayons for reading and writing don't quite work how mine do. My brother is dyslexic. So Gary taps into a whole stack of other crayons that he's elevated and he's just brilliant with it. So sometimes we need to sharpen a crayon and other times we need to use other crayons. So how better sharpening, how else a different crayon. Now I got to interview Sir Richard Branson on stage. And Richard, of course, as you would know, is dyslexic.
Yeah.
And I asked him what he thought his greatest quality as a leader was. And he said, listening. Now, most people would see Branson as a mouth. He sees himself as ears. And he said, and when I listen to my staff, when I listen to people, I'm somehow good at finding the talent that's within them and helping them grow it. And sometimes it's a talent that they don't even know that they've got inside them. So it goes back to your wonderful definition, to find the remarkable aspect of that human being and to grow it. Every person's got the crayons that they can be really good at. Discovering them and then applying those crayons within a group genius context is part of the role of leadership.
I think it's a wonderful concept. I mean, I believe that the number one role of leadership is to enhance people's gifts, which is another word for talent. In fact, when I was researching this whole idea of talents, I discovered that the original Greek word for gift was charisma. So there's nothing fake or flash about charisma. And what you're saying here is this talent. So really, in my context, the key role of leadership is to help people to find the crayons that work for them and to sharpen them.
Yes, but it's also interesting because I very much in that. I mean, it's become a strength finder way of doing things, I guess. But I also like the aspect that once you've discovered the crayons you're really good at, you can sometimes use those crayons to enhance some of the crayons you're not being special with. So my brother, as he travelled through life, he was able to develop certain strengths of crayons that then assisted him in being able to, later in life, be able to read better. So his writing will still struggle, but his reading is now, he won't read super fast, but he'll read super deeply. So sometimes every now and again, it's good to tackle a crayon you're not so special with. And why I think we need to do this is because if I only do what I'm really good at, I then lose a bit of an empathy of what it feels like to be hopeless. And for as good as I am at certain crayons, there's other crayons that, that's a real struggle. And it's important to remember what it feels like to feel like you're a bit of an idiot. It's important to remember what it feels like to be humbled by not being able to do something initially. And therefore, it teaches us that to be grit fit. How do you stumble your way and then crawl your way and then walk your way? And it may not be the thing you're going to be best at in life, but it's important to remember that empathy of what it feels like to be like that. And therefore, it helps somebody at a leadership level to go, I mean, I see so many, a CEO, one of my favourites I've been working with for a number of years now, but when I taught the concept of Kaizen, that ongoing tiny little improvements, Kaizen is a little bit of getting better every day and really unpacking and exploring that whole approach. He loved it. So he said to his staff, our theme for next year is going to be Kaizen, which means continuous improvement and tiny little blah, 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 blah. And then, boom, he thinks, well, I've said it, so it's done. He said it somewhere in a speech that some people by then had drifted off and something. You've got to keep returning to these things again and again and again and again and again and teach them in multi-layered ways for people to be able to own them. And therefore, if the CEO thinks everybody learns just as how I learn, heard it, got it, good, move on, that's not true of a lot of other people. You've got to put yourself to really be a good leader, you've got to, I think, have empathetic leadership. You may not agree with the other human being. You may not agree with the customer all the time, but you need to be able to walk in their shoes and understand how that feels, and therefore learn to be better, smarter and wiser because of it and through it. So it's like, as you know, I'm a member of Mensa. So I was asked on radio what Mensa stands for. My standard reply is, my ego needs some attention. Mensa means we're good at an IQ test, but here's IQ and here's intelligence. So I got into Mensa when I was 30, and thankfully not when I was 3. So if a child of 5 is, you know, and the parents start saying, oh, he's really bright, she's really bright, oh, they're really bright, they're super bright, and the child takes pride in the fact of being bright and takes pride that their parents and their teachers love them because they're bright, then what does a bright child not want to do? A bright child doesn't want to appear as if they can't do something. So they will only tackle what they're good at. So I would say, don't praise intelligence, praise character. When you say to a youngster, I love the way that when you couldn't do that, you gave it 3 more goes. I love the way that you were able to master that so easily, but then you were able to help Julie or Jono get it as well. I love that. So you're praising the character aspect, because character may be the most important element. Character and culture are a double helix. You can't have one without the other, as far as I'm concerned.
No, I was fascinated that you had that as the basis of your point. I mean, there's been a lot of talk, you know, a lot of repetition of Drucker's famous words that culture eats strategy for breakfast, you know, around the place lately. And there's a lot of return, I think, to culture. And I was fascinated. Culture often means the way we do things around here, but I prefer, which you alluded to, I prefer Michael Henderson, you know, the corporate anthropologist's insight. He says culture is about what it means to be human here. And you were very much aligning with that from what you're talking about, culture and character. And, of course, what it means to be human is we're all individuals, we're all unique. And what you're adding to that fact that not only are we all geniuses, but there's also this both-and concept that we have to fail a lot. In fact, it reminded me, I've got a blog that comes out in a couple of days, and I called it, I've failed a number of times this week, how exciting.
Good title.
You know, as the title, because, you know, and it kind of, I actually have had a number of failures this week, and it has been exciting. But I reflected on that Benjamin Zander idea. You probably know that art of possibility, where, you know, every time someone in the orchestra made a mistake, he'd say, "How fascinating!" And I think so. You're kind of touching on that we've all got genius. You know, Branson is a great listener, but not so good a talker, that he would acknowledge. But it's both and. And you've put a fascinating image in my head that organisations are really a giant box of crayons, all different.
Yes, it's and within that, I mean, you've resonated. So, you know, I left Australia for 3 months, and when I was 23 years of age, thinking I'd go travelling with my backpack, and 7 years later I came home. And those 7 years were quite remarkable. You're stepping your way through life and learning and different cultures, different environments. So I'm in a small kibbutz room in the north of Israel with Katyusha mortar bombs flying through the air. And my Russian roommate heard me complaining about a book I'd written that was in my backpack, and nobody wanted to publish my book. And my Russian roommate, Zhenya Lenda, a geophysicist, he says to me, "Len, always remember this, Perve blin chomom." And I say, "I will, Zhenya. What's it mean?" Perve blin chomom, he says, "It means the first pancake is always lumpy." First pancake's always lumpy. If you're going to tackle something new and challenging, you're going to muck up. You're going to fail. You're going to have a horrible time. You're going to feel like an idiot. It's how you keep making the pancakes. And eventually, and one CEO, when he heard me tell my Genia Perve Blin Cremant, he said, I loved it. He said, I'm up early. And so the first pancakes are lumpy, and then they get to be burnt at some stage, but in between are the magic ones. And it's that ability to keep. So practice to me is not about perfection, it's about progress. Practice makes progress.
Yes.
Kind of environment that sometimes not only allows mistakes, but invites mistakes. Let's stuff this up. Let's break this apart and make it. How can we make this system that we're inventing fail? Because if you then can make it fail before you've released it, you can then solve all those other problems too within it. Which means that we've got to feel as if it's okay to be an idiot at times. It's okay to know nothing. It's okay to go, listen, I'm ignorant. Tell me, explain, share.
And yet that is very much counterintuitive to how a lot of organisations operate and how a lot of bosses lead. So how do we... I love the Russian family, more of, less of, rid of, toss in and instead of. And I think that there are 5 great ways that we can... Because my sense is we need to get rid of this idea of we have to be perfect.
Yeah, and the idea that the leader will know all the answers. I mean, some leaders set themselves up to be like that. But I remember in my very early years, I was doing a lot of work with schools. I was doing a lot of work with youngsters, and then a couple of organisations invited me in, and one of them in particular had this environment that, they did now I'd say they did the Tame really well. Everyone knew what they're supposed to be working on. The boss was constantly there walking around looking over their shoulder. But when the boss went on leave, never went on leave for very long at all, because within a couple of days things weren't working as well. Things weren't, and it was obvious to me as an outsider. People were doing what they needed to do because they had to. They weren't doing what they loved. They weren't impassioned about it. They weren't encouraged to be contributors to it all. They just had to do their little bit, and that was it. And when the boss wasn't there, they'd just do enough of their little bit to maybe get by. So creating that kind of... And in today's world, it just doesn't work. No one person can know it all.
It kind of brings me to what I think this is a very old idea, and one of the reasons why I think it's been ignored was because the original idea came from a woman and not a man, which I find fascinating. But I just was doing a bit of writing about this earlier, and this was said in 1924, so it's a while ago. But it says, leadership is not defined by the exercise of power, but by the capacity to increase the sense of power amongst those led. The most essential work of the leader is to create more leaders.
Who was that, Ian?
It comes from Mary Parker Follett, who the guru himself, Drucker, called her the prophet of management. And yet, my sense is because she was a woman, it's kind of been forgotten, because, Tom Peters, Ralph Nader, others have cottoned onto this idea that the purpose of leadership is to develop more leaders. And I think you've been articulating how to do that in so many ways. We've really got an amazing box full of crayons to help people to be more leaders. Because at the end of the day, the boss doesn't need to be the boss. The boss needs to help other people to be leaders.
And you look at this library behind me, and we had to cull half my library when we moved over from Western Australia to Victoria. In fact, when we built this library in this new place of ours, in what I call my creativity suite, and we had to fortify that wall because, and the chap building it said, what are you going to have in your library? And I said, books. What else are you going to have in your library? It's a huge library. So, but one of those many titles behind me is The Winner Effect by Professor Ian Robertson. Now, Robertson writes in the style of Malcolm Gladwell, beautiful, accessible writing. And he is also the neuroscientist who's doing the research. And he says in The Winner Effect that power does go to the brain. Power actually affects the chemistry of our brain. And it's why we do need a team around us and with us. Because a lot of people will go into leadership because they have a feeling for doing good for others. And when they are in leadership, and the more the leadership power builds and the chemicals of it become kind of addictive, they may switch it to being more about themselves. So to maintain that focus of leading for others and creating an environment for others to grow and prosper, as opposed to it becomes all about me. And it's one of the most interesting things. I mean, my wife, Lindy, has a background in film and television. We met because I was being interviewed on her TV show. But
right.
She worked for a brief period of time. Michael Jackson was in Australia, and Lindy was working with him. And he had all of these people around him, but none of them are actually contributing to saying, Michael, don't do that, or you need less of this, or mate, you need to pull your head in here, or gee, this is not healthy for you, Michael. If you've got a team of people who, because of your position and power and talent, will just go, yes, 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 then it can be dangerous to your own chemistry. Go into leadership, you need folk around you. And that's why it's good. Spend time with your kids, spend time with your grandchildren, spend time with your husband, your wife, who can pull you back into line at times and go, hey, doesn't sound great.
No. Yeah, I mean, you touched on...
A bit of that. Yeah.
Yes. You touched on this right at the beginning, I sense, and you didn't call it this, but it's always been... It's my absolute conviction that self-awareness is the number one leadership skill. And we need, in order to be aware of ourselves, we need other people to let us know that what we can't see, which is what you're alluding to.
And it is a self-understanding is a very tricky thing. I mean, that quote that says 75% of people believe they're above average. Part of our psyche is a little bit of self-delusion, and
yes.
might need that at times to get us through particular moments. But that ability to lead and be vulnerable at the same time, the ability to face the fear and do it anyway, and understand that others may think in different ways. Hear a dog barking, go into fear, as opposed to,
well, in fact, my dog is barking right at the moment. She always wants to join in the conversation.
Yeah, it's just such a self-understanding, self-actualization. When Maslow put that hierarchy of needs and said self-actualization is the pinnacle, you got to remember that means everything beneath it is the most important. Because you don't get to that pinnacle unless you've got that safety factor, unless you've got the survival factor, unless you've got the belonging factor, relationship. As you say, you've got to have other human beings that go, Ian, pull your head in, or Kappa, that's not great, mate. At the same time, people you can bounce ideas with. If we try to do it alone in today's world, and it's true of yesterday's world, I think, alone, again, naturally, the great philosopher Sullivan once said,
yeah.
And we come into this world alone, we go out alone, naturally. But the question is how we are good with others.
Yes, indeed. I'm just going to shut my door so just one moment.
One of my favourite little jokes, they say that every dog has a say, but a dog with a broken tail has a weekend.
Say again?
I was just sharing a private joke with all of these people when you're out of the room. Every dog has its day, but a dog with a broken tail has a weekend.
That's right. Well, yeah, I'm a joke
that only 5% of people get or think is funny.
Well, unfortunately, I'm home. She just likes to be enjoying the conversation. Anyhow, so we're kind of coming to the end of our time. How do we capture? Because you've given just so many wonderful insights into the essence of leadership. How would you capture it all in a sentence?
Well, the thing about systems is that all of the stuff that we've talked about, it's got to become part of your daily ritual and your daily way of going about things. So it's good to have a model in mind, like the Russians. Just having a model in mind can get you thinking a certain way. But never let, the great other philosopher, Bob Hudson, once said, never let a chance go by, my friend, never let a chance go by. Little known song called the Newcastle Song, but never let a chance go by to instill this kind of these kind of practices into your daily wisdom of living your life, whether it's the Russians or every time we face a challenge to get the Tame stuff sorted out and then work through the wicked. Have a great group genius, a great flow of people around us, and in that group genius utilise all the Russians, but to do it constantly so it becomes just part of your habit of living, part of your habit of mind. And then every now and again you've got to break that habit of mind, because the brain is magic, but it is essentially sometimes a lazy organ. It falls back to the way we've always done things, and our default position may not be our best supportive decision when we need to break some of the stuff. So how better, how else, smash things open, break things apart, and always love the challenge.
Well, thanks so much, Glenn. It's been great to get stuck in. Folks, my guest today has been Glenn Capelli, and some wonderful insights into 21st century leadership. I'll be putting Glenn's details at the bottom of this video. So if you'd like to contact him, then the details will be there. So Glenn, thanks so much again. And folks, we'll see you next time.